Morning, everybody. This is Steve Fletcher with the Trumpet for My People. Today is September 13th. Actually, it's September 14th, 2021. Um, but this article came out on September 13th, so I want to talk about this. We are talking about the Abraham Accords 1 year later and the anniversary that is taking place yesterday and today. Yesterday there was an event in New York. Today there's going to be an event in Washington, D.C. I don't even know what time that is going to be. I'm looking for information on that, and I will give you an update later as to what transpired during that event. I imagine it hasn't happened yet and will be happening in a little bit. And so I'll continue to watch for that, and I'll bring an update on that in a little bit. But right now, what I want to do is I want to look at the biblical scenario of the promise that God gave to Abraham and look at how all of this connects to where we are now. Okay, we have 1 year ago, the Abraham Accords were agreed upon. The Bible says when they say peace and safety, sudden destruction will come upon them. But we also have a declaration of peace and safety that took place between the United States, Israel, Morocco, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates. I think Egypt's been involved, Sudan, just a number of different countries in the Middle East area. Okay, and this is the Abraham Accords. All right, now let's take a look at the biblical scenario. We're looking at Genesis chapter 17. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, I am Almighty God. Walk before me and be blameless. I will make my covenant between me and you and will multiply you exceedingly. Then Abraham fell on his face, and God talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be a father of many nations. No longer shall you be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful. I will make nations of you, and kings shall come from you. And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you in the generations, for an everlasting covenant to be God to you and your descendants after you. Also I give to you and your descendants after you in the land in which you are a stranger, all the land of Canaan, as an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. Okay, this promise to Abraham was so big and so important, and this is probably the reason, if you go back to the biblical scenario of the promise of God to Abraham, this is probably the reason why the United Nations ambassador yesterday did not want to mention even the name of Abraham. When she talked about the Accords, this normalization agreement, but she would not say Abraham Accords, because the covenant with God, between God and Abraham, was so important. Okay, and God said to Abraham, As for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your descendants after you throughout their generations. This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and your descendants after you. Every male child among you shall be circumcised, and you shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskins. It shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. He who is 8 days old among you shall be circumcised, every male child in your generations. He who is born in your house or bought with money from any foreigner who is not your descendant, he who is born in your house and who is bought with your money must be circumcised, and my covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. The uncircumcised male child who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, that person shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. Okay. Goes on to talk about the promise to Sarah, who was going to have a child. Then God said to Abraham, As for Sarah your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name, and I will bless her, and I also give you a son by her. Then I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of peoples shall be from her. Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed, and said in his heart, Shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? And shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? And Abraham said to God, Oh, that Ishmael might live before you. Then God said, No, Sarah your wife shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his descendants after him. And as for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him. I will make him fruitful and will multiply him exceedingly. He shall beget 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you at this set time next year. Okay, I want to focus here now on this phrase, at this set time next year. Okay, so God gave Abraham a promise, right? The promise was that Sarah is going to bear him a son, and she will, okay, bear a son at this set time next year. So, in other words, God is speaking to Abraham on this specific day, at this set time, and he's saying at this set time, again, next year, at this exact same time, Sarah will bear a son. Okay, now let's take a look at this phrase in the original. Let's go to the Interlinear Bible and take a look. The verse we're looking at is Genesis 17:21. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you at this set time next year. Okay, so let's take a look at this in Genesis 17:21, and we're going to look at what this means. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, okay, whom shall bear to you, whom Sarah shall bear to you at this time next year. Okay, at this time next year. Okay, now in the English, it says set time. Okay, set time. In the original, at this time. But the reason why it says set time is because if we go to this word time here, we're going to see that this is a set time of God. This is a moed. This is a moedim. This is the set time. Okay, appointed time, place, or meeting. Moed, the moedim, the appointed times of God at this set time. Now, when was Isaac born? Isaac resembled his father Abraham in many ways. In fact, he looked so much like his father that there could be no mistake in anybody's mind about their being father and son. Our sages say that God fashioned Isaac's face to be exactly like his father's because there were some wicked people who spread tales that Isaac's father was Abimelech, king of the Philistines, or that Isaac was a foundling whom Abraham and Sarah adopted. It is impossible, these talebearers said, that Abraham should become a father at the age of 100 years and Sarah at the age of 90. But when people saw Abraham and Isaac with their own eyes, there could be no doubt in their mind that Abraham was Isaac's father and Isaac was Abraham's son. Okay? Isaac was born on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. Okay? Rosh Hashanah. Isaac was born. I'll leave a couple more links for you about all of this if you want to study more about Jesus' birth and the Feast of Trumpets and Isaac also being born on this day. For example, in this article it says the Day of Trumpets in the biblical and Jewish calendars is also New Year's Day for commercial and royal reckonings. This day signified a time of new beginnings to all those in Israel who accepted biblical teachings. In his book, The Symbolism of Jewish Holy Days, Ernest Martin includes information from the complete art scroll Matzor. In his book, he provides a summary of accounts found in the Jewish Talmud and has some interesting quotes related to important biblical figures of the Old Testament. For example, the patriarchs Abraham and Jacob were born on Rosh Hashanah. Abraham was a new beginning for mankind after its failure to realize the promise of Adam and Noah. Jacob was a new beginning for the Jewish people, for it was with him that Jews advanced from the status of individuals to that of a united family of the threshold of nationhood. Martin also notes that other prominent men, notably Isaac, Joseph, and Samuel, were also born on Rosh Hashanah, the Day of Trumpets. So the whole connection about the promise of God to Abraham was that on the Feast of Trumpets, at this set time next year, Isaac will be born. Okay. Well, if we go to, we're at 1 year later, right? Okay. September 13th, 2021. This pact was set up on April 15th. This agreement came together last year on September 15th, 2020. Okay, it was the 26th day of Elul, but basically what ended up happening then, as soon as they were done with this agreement last year, it gave all of the people from Israel, especially the people from Israel, time to get back home to be able to celebrate the new agreement on Rosh Hashanah. It was 3 days before Rosh Hashanah, this agreement. It was the timing of coming up to Rosh Hashanah, and this agreement took place. The Abraham Accords connected to the Feast of Trumpets. Okay. Well, if Abraham was given a promise on the Feast of Trumpets that at this time next year, now we are looking at the Abraham Accords 1 year later. This is the promise of God to Abraham that is being fulfilled 1 year later in the arrival of Isaac. This is the promise to Abraham that a year later, this is the fulfillment of the covenant, is the 1 year anniversary. Okay? And this is what I wanted to share with you today as we're looking at September 13th and 14th. Okay? And then if we go to the Hebrew calendar on the 10th day of Tishri this year, okay, 10th day of Tishri in 5782, it's 16th of September. Okay, so what we're looking at then is the fulfillment of the Abraham Accords 1 year later on September 14th. The agreement was signed on September 15th, and September 16th this year is Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, but it's also connected to the timing of the circumcision event of Isaac. Isaac was born on the Feast of Trumpets 7 days later, 8 days later. I mean, we are right on the actual renewal of this covenant on September 14th is the 8th day of Tishri. September 14th is the 8th day of Tishri. Okay. September 14th is the 8th day of Tishri. And this agreement that is taking place is on the 8th day, and this is the 8th day of the circumcision of Isaac. 8th day. The 8th day. Okay. So all of this that is happening within the Abraham Accords, there's so much more to this. You know, the Bible text says at this set time next year. Set time is Moedim, appointed time, place, or meeting. This was not just any day of the year. It had to happen on a set time, an appointed time. It just so happens to be that it was the Feast of Trumpets, and the Abraham Accords goes right along with the biblical scenario. And now they're having their 1 year anniversary. Now, let's take a look at one more thing here. When they say peace and safety, sudden destruction cometh upon them as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. As we have shared in previous messages, this whole peace and safety agreement and the Abraham Accords is connected to a birth event. The promise to Abraham was the birth event. At this set time next year, the promise to Abraham that he would have a son, then you have to circumcise your child on the 8th day, and they shall not escape. The peace and safety is connected to the birth. The Abraham Accords is connected to the Feast of Trumpets, and Feast of Trumpets is connected to the promise of God to Abraham about the birth of Isaac. It was the year following the covenant that the agreement was fulfilled. It was carried out. The promise was kept 1 year later at this set time next year. Okay? So we are right now on the 8th day of Tishri. In 2 days, it's the Day of Atonement. Okay? So when they say peace and safety, sudden destruction. So we have today, we have tomorrow, we have the next day, and if we go according to the Torah calendar, we have until the 18th. Is this the declaration of peace and safety that's going to be bringing the sudden destruction? If so, then we are looking at the next 1 to 5 days for the sudden destruction event to occur. Okay? So I just wanted to share some new information with you about the Abraham Accords and how it's connected to the biblical scenario. And then later today, I will continue searching for the information about what is taking place at the actual event and give you an update on that later today. I pray you guys are blessed. This is Steve Fletcher with the trumpet for my people, the sign of his coming revealed.